That's why I couldn't tell you I was on the cover of George magazine, or else you wouldn't have come in here. My buddy, John Kennedy Jr. How do you like that?
Actually taking cue from folks like yourself.
And I think that we ought to do better than we're doing, and I'm glad that you reminded me of it. In the long history of the world, only a few generations have been granted the role of defending freedom in its hour of maximum danger. I do not believe that any of us would exchange places with any other people or any other generation. The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
On our way here in Air Force One, I was looking down over your countryside out here because most of the way from Oklahoma, I was looking down at clouds. And I could say that it reminded me of a story, but actually I wanted to tell the story whether anything reminded me or not. After 200 years, 2 centuries, she still stands strong and true on the granite ridge, and her glow is held steady, no matter what storm.
There's probably more interest in this gentleman than in any other person in this country, and probably with good thinking. John F. Kennedy Jr., he is the mastermind of this extraordinary magazine, George, which is a hoot. There's so many people with so much interest in you, and I don't want to delve into the macabre interest, but the serious interest.
My family, we had always been grew up around politics, that it was a fascinating way to spend one's career. And I had been always kind of interested in how you could get that idea out to more people, because as I grew older, it became clear that not that many people shared that view.
It was also a family that liked the press, generally, commiserated with the press,
yeah,
enjoyed
I think the generation before me, more so.
Some quarters, sir, that big business is using the stock market slump as a means of forcing you to come to terms with business. Now we have you where they want you. Have you seen any reflection of this attitude? I can't believe I'm where big business wants me.
Mr. President, the practice of managed news is attributed to your administration. Will you give us your definition and ask us why you find it necessary to practice it?
You are charging us with something, Ms. Gray, and then you're asking me to define what it is you're charging me with. I think you might. Let me just say that we've had very limited success in managing the news, if that's what we've been trying to do. And perhaps you tell us what it is that you object to in our treatment of the news.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Well, I don't believe in managed news at all. I thought we ought to get everything we want.
Well, I think you should too, Ms. Gray. I'm for that.
In the Memorial Stadium of Great Falls High School, the President describes the United States as a keystone in the Arch of Freedom, an ornament to the cause of freedom all around the globe.
We are the keystone in the Arch of Freedom. If the United States were to falter, the whole world, in my opinion, would inevitably begin to move towards the communist bloc. So we need your support. These are complicated problems which face a citizenry. Most of us grew up in a relative period of isolation and neutrality, which was our policy from the time of George Washington.
Memories of your father are not great.
They're great, but they're not plentiful.
Or of your Uncle Robert, right?
They're more vivid of him. I mean,
You were how old when he died?
I was 8.
So that's a vivid memory to you?
Fairly, yeah. He was
Really?
a very vivid character. He was quite a forceful presence.
With all of these groups, and particularly perhaps with young people, is the fact that everything's become so impersonal. everything's so large and so big, and you feel that you don't play any role anymore, that you can't affect things. You can't affect what government does. It's so big and it's so large and it's so far away. It spends a great deal of money, but you are just sort of a small cog. You have very little to say. That's the explanation, really, of the hippies. They reached the conclusion that they can't affect their own lives and they can't affect society, and there's a lot of terrible things they see going on within our own country and perhaps around the world, and this distresses them, but they can't see their ability to change the course of events, so they turn off. They pull the curtain down and say, we can't get off the earth, but we're going to leave it as much as we can. And I think that's perhaps the major problem we have within government, but I think it's the great problem that all of us have in society as to how we're going to come back to the idea that the individual is important.
I think it's very good to be the son of a legend.
I mean, it's complicated, and it makes for a rich and complicated life. So, but that's, I think, part of the puzzle to figure out.
We used to have a lot of questions, and then I used to give them arithmetic, which they said I memorized, but I had inherited from my father, because like 5 times 5, take away 1 divided by 3 times 5.
You were apparently very keen that they should discuss subjects.
Yes, and now with my grandchildren, I'm discussing sheiks. What is a sheik or what is a sheikh? If they're in the Middle East, what is the difference between the Middle East and the Far East? And questions like that. And if you've seen a sheik's picture in the paper, has he got a crown on? And who is the king? Is there a king?
Where did you derive your courage from?
Well, that was the training, I suppose, of years, and trusting God that He doesn't give you a cross heavier than you can bear.
Now, when you look at him, John, you look at your father, and you must see him all the time. I mean, we see him everywhere. We see him in tapes and visions and on camera. You didn't know him, right? How do you look at him? Is he my father, a president, a great man?
I understand that my father is part of the mythology of this country. He was also a very compelling political figure. Certainly he was aware himself of the opportunities for politics to be both fun and serious, and that's one of the things that we've tried to, that mix.
You've probably gathered by now, I think Frank Sinatra would make a fine president. But I don't know whether we can get him to run. Is it worth it if you have to give up being a king?
Fellow citizens, today marks my first State of the Union address to you, a constitutional duty as old as our republic itself. President Washington began this tradition in 1790 after reminding the nation that the destiny of self-government and the preservation of the sacred fire of liberty is finally staked on the experiment entrusted to the hands of the American people. For our friends in the press who place a high premium on accuracy, let me say, I did not actually hear George Washington say that.
Was it tough being a junior?
I mean, sure.
I'm going to present someone who is a treat. Nostalgia is a powerful force. Join me now as I bring to this podium John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Jr.
Over a quarter century ago, my father stood before you to accept the nomination for the presidency of the United States. So many of you came into public service because of him. In a very real sense, because of you, he is with us still. I owe a special debt to Teddy. He has shown that an unwavering commitment to the poor, to the elderly, to those without hope, regardless of fashion or convention, is the greatest reward of public service.
I thought you were a lawyer. I was.
What happened?
Politics isn't dry. It isn't dull. So why should a magazine that covers it be? In fact, George just doesn't cover politics, it celebrates it. We will celebrate it. Celebrate it as a general rule, but we won't be afraid to criticize it when necessary. George is about the art of politics and the politics of art. So we'll review films and books and music. We'll talk about fashion, television, and art, all as they relate to the political process. All without the blinders of ideology. I mean, if you're asking if it's hard being me,
it's brought you a unique life.
Absolutely, and great opportunities and some challenges. But all in all, I feel very fortunate. So it's not so bad.
You think it's
I'd recommend it.
Good. How come you turned out so normal?
I don't know that I have.
You really are normal. I've met a lot of people with less celebrity attached to their name than you, and you really have come out quite normal. You're a regular guy.
I had an idea and been kind of playing with it for a while in my head with my partner. It seemed like the best time to take a flyer if you're ever going to take one. And it looked like the idea would catch, and it was enormously sort of exciting to be part of it, so we just went with it.
Well, the name of the magazine, just to flash it up there, it's like a book report here. Here it is, George Magazine, the latest edition with Charles Barkley on the cover. I've got to ask you, what does Charles Barkley, Robert De Niro, and Cindy Crawford, what do these three people have in common? They have graced your cover all wearing George Washington costumes.
Well, they're not politicians, as you can see. But what we were trying to do, I mean, as the title suggests, is really talk about politics and showcase it in a different way. And you have to catch people's attention. And what we wanted to do is George Washington is an icon, and he's an American icon, and we wanted to use other American icons to kind of play with that iconography.
And how would you judge the success of George over, like, the next 5 years?
Well, I think that if you can get one person who felt that they were not interested in politics to all of a sudden, buy this magazine and learn about it, and as well as really, have important stories, that would be the bottom line, success for us. I got a letter from a woman who takes tickets in a movie theater in Virginia. She said, I bring George to work. He said, when I sit in the movie, and she said, I'd never done that before in my life. And so every time I hear something like that, I think, well, we're onto something. We're helping people who might not otherwise connect with politics do it.
With this magazine, I think the country has the whole theater of politics. Theater of politics. Theater of politics.
Certainly the way Americans were accessing information about politics and politicians was changing. Candidates were appearing on late-night talk shows, on talk radio, on sitcoms.
Hi, Murphy Brown. You must be my new secretary.
John, hi. Oh, I guess the whole lawyer thing didn't work out.
Put on your blindfold. I want to do mystery guest right now. Mystery guest theme music. Our mystery guest could even be disguising his voice. You wouldn't even know it. Mystery guest, would you care to just mumble something, whether in the feminine or masculine tone?
Yes, it's me, but
Oh, all right. This is going to be tough. All right. Fred Norris first.
Are you in television? Recently.
Oh, okay.
Do you have your own series? No, I don't.
Hey, I'm like a game show host.
Yeah.
Mystery guest, this guy will never get who you are.
Are you primarily known as a sports star?
No, I'm not.
It's John Kennedy Jr.
That's right. How'd you know?
Take off my mask.
John Kennedy Jr. How's that for a mystery guest? How do you know his voice? He doesn't have a voice.
Last night, I was watching his autobiography on A&E.
You had an autobiography?
I don't know, apparently. I didn't know about it.
Did you participate in that?
No.
Okay, so you're growing up in high school. At what point do you realize that you not only you're good looking, you got power over women, and you're a Kennedy. At what point does it all kick in?
Well, the Kennedy part kicked in fairly early.
Cool.
The other part, I'm not sure it ever kicks in. You know, it's.
You don't know your John Charles?
Fleet.
I was a late bloomer.
Really? 18?
Somewhere in high school.
Really?
Yeah, I like everything.
With regular girls or a model? Or did you start with regular girls?
Regular girls.
Smart. You practiced on regular girls till you got to the model. When John wrote me a note and said, "Look, I got a sense of humor. I hear all that. You say that I'm not the editor of George Magazine. You say that I'm too stupid to be the editor of George Magazine. You say I do nothing. All I do is rollerblade and I don't do George Magazine and date. Well, hey, I'm not knocking it. I mean, I wish I was doing that.
It's only jealousy,
Yeah.
In you, there was always this editor-writer wannabe?
I'm not sure. No.
Random House has just published the George Magazine book of political lists from the editors of George. And good morning, Mr. Kennedy.
Good morning, Mr. Imus.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well. Thanks for having me on your show this morning.
You're quite welcome. And I was very skeptical.
Well,
but it's
and
very.
Now, after you've read it,
it's very entertaining.
Thank you.
Well, and it's amusing.
Yeah.
But Publishers Weekly describes it as a crucial resource for Jeopardy contestants and Beltway nerds. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, I think people like lists and they like trivia and they like reading about sort of information nuggets that are ironic or about things that they didn't know about. And so we took that tried and true idea and applied it to politics. It's a nice little book. I think it's a good information resource, the kind of thing where you can open it at any page and read something that you didn't know. And in that respect, it advances the sort of broader mission of the magazine, which is to make politics interesting and accessible and hopefully entertaining.
So, well, here's the one with Bill I'm wondering about. See, in January 19th, page 277.
Okay.
And this is still under sex scandals that didn't end political careers. Another former, is that misspelled there, Charlie?
It's just a typo. Oh, God. Where?
Another Arkansas state employee, but
it's okay.
It's
a missing S.
Okay, it's a missing S. Right. So since accused Clinton of sexual harassment, sued him for violating the constitutional rights, yada, yada, yada.
That she had a 12-year affair, torrid 12-year affair with Bill Clinton, and he said, well, I would have just gotten up and said, no one has a torrid 12-year affair. I mean, they had a torrid 12-day affair, but certainly not a torrid 12-year one. It's factually, as I say, factually correct, and it's in the book.
I haven't talked to poor Joe since you ruined his life.
I knew you were going to ask me that. Oh, boy.
Well, no,
you go through with your fine-tooth comb.
I didn't go through. I read your book. It's not Larry King.
I better get my copy out. But, your question, I don't think, was exactly that. It was, what are we to do? With her?
Yeah, but we don't know. I mean, obviously, just hope, I guess.
Right.
Hope for the best.
Well, I mean, do you think really people continue to care all that much?
No, I don't. Do you?
No, I do not. No, not at this juncture. No. But clearly, if you're in the journalism business, it is a much more riveting story than if you are have kids in college and you're trying to make payments on your house, and really what you're most concerned about is, are the economy going to hold up so you keep your job or so your kids get a job? Everything else seems to more or less pale by comparison. I mean, I think it's certain comforting to think that, real, live, flawed human beings actually made it to the presidency and flourished despite them. Wondering when I was listening to the show this morning, how you actually tell, they're calling for investigations to discover how the connection between whether or not the money given by the Chinese government to the Democrats affected the U.S. decision to sell satellite technology to China. And I wondered how it was possible to actually, tell that connection. I would think that.
Oh, I don't think it is.
I mean, it could go on forever.
It's only, I think. I mean, I know it doesn't sound responsible, but it's only for our entertainment. John Kennedy Jr., the book is the George Book of Political Lists. It's like that New York Times Book of Style we use, right?
Exactly. It was a research must.
Yeah, exactly.
It absolutely is.
John, thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
John Kennedy Jr. here in the Amsterdam.
My name is Jimmy Carter, and I'm running for president. And I guarantee you, 1976 will be the year when we give the government of this country back to the people of this country.
One of your father's great friends told me once in an interview that he believed when your father filled out 2 terms, he would have traveled and written and gotten into magazines. He would have been in the reporting end. That
Right.
surprise you?
No, I mean, I had heard that also.
We have a clip from a show called Look Here. We're going to look there and then talk about it.
If you were to have a son, would you encourage a political career for him? Yes, and I hope if I had a daughter, I might encourage her to play some part. I don't think this should be confined to men only, but I would definitely. I would hope he would grow up to be, if not a politician in the sense of devoting all of his time, I would hope that whatever he did do, that he would have some sense of responsibility for what went on.
You know, he'd always said that he thought everyone should run for office. There are other ways to contribute to the public discourse, and we all want to do it in the way that participate in the way that we can.
So you feel as if you are doing that with your magazine, in a way.
I guess so. I mean, it's.
Well, don't be modest. I mean, it's a political magazine. You bring up various issues.
Exactly, and I think everyone has to find their way into politics or any other professions on their own. Do it on their own speed and in their own way.
Their own timetable. That sure sounds like you haven't given up the notion of maybe going into politics.
Maybe not.
Oh, come on, John.
Hey, no one's ever asked me that question before.
Really?
Yeah.
I know. I'm so original, aren't I? As you look back on your father's political career, what do you think his greatest legacy will continue to be?
I was in Mount Rushmore the other day, and they do a vote of popular president. So people come up to me and say, your family or your father got me into politics, or was a great man, and that happens to me several times a day, and that's a really special thing.
That still exists, that togetherness in the Kennedys?
Yeah.
Doesn't go away, right?
No. It's one of the great lucky things about being in my family, which has stayed.
That gathering concept, right?
Yeah.
It is familial, right?
It is. You have learned a great deal at this college, but your learning must continue to be a lifelong experience that is informed by your direct involvement in the lives of your fellow citizens.
Your mother was a hell of an editor at Doubleday.
That's what I hear.
Would she have liked George?
I think she would have.
Because?
I think that, when we first talked about the idea, she said, well, John, you're not going to do the Mad magazine of politics. and I said, well, no, and I thought that was good advice. But I think that she would have appreciated the fact that people had always said that you can't do a fun magazine about politics that combines the serious as well as the playful, which is about personalities, because that's what public life is about.
Because she had that. She had a good sense of humor, right?
She had a good sense of humor, and I don't think she was a slave to conventional wisdom. And I think that there's a certain irony in the whole enterprise, and I think she would have appreciated it.
I mean, how did George Magazine get involved?
We were searching of ways in order to try to bring politics to life in a kind of an inventive way, and sort of to exploit the institutional rivalries between politicians and the press, and to raise money for a good cause seemed like a good way to do it.
And what happened to your foot here? You're in a cast this evening.
Yeah, I'm in a cast. I broke my ankle. I was playing sports, and first weekend of the summer, and I'm laid up for a couple weeks.
So I guess we won't see you racing around the course tonight in a 328, will we?
No, I asked them if they have any automatics, but well, maybe I will. Who knows,
Do you think someday you might write about you and George? There being so much interest in you, a first-person piece. I mean, you wrote a terrific introduction, but just about you.
No.
Why? You don't think?
Well, I mean, I'd let somebody else do it. I don't know if I'd bring to an objective eye to it.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Back with our remaining moments with Donald Trump on this rather historic night, the announcement of a presidential exploratory committee. This letter that you got from JFK, July 1999. Your father passed away when?
Right.
In July?
JFK Jr., that's exactly correct. He just
I mean, it must have been one of the last things he did. He was a great guy. He was a friend of mine.
Dear Donald, I read over the weekend of your father's passing, and I just wanted to drop you a note. No matter where you are in life, losing a parent changes you. I know you had an active relationship, and I hope you'll get ample time to reflect. He sounds like a fascinating man from what I read in the Times. I like that he would go over his various work sites and pick up stray nails and return them. And clearly, he never lost his perspective. My condolences to you and your family. Sincerely, John Kennedy.
This was a tragedy that he died because he had so much going. He was a fabulous guy. I mean, he was really, truly a handsome, wonderful, great, bright guy.
Is that line correct? No matter where you are in life, losing a parent changes you.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough.
As George Washington wrote dozens of times over and over to practice his penmanship when he was a young man, labor to keep alive in your breast that little spark of celestial fire called conscience. Thank you very much for this honor, and good luck.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
No matter what storm.
Can't wait to be with you. You can't wait on their affirmation. You can't wait on their approval. You can't wait on their support. Sometimes you just gotta run and look behind you and say, everybody who wants to run, but I can't stop running because you're not running with me. Listen to me, hear me. You can't stop chasing your dream just because somebody in your life is chasing with you. You can't stop believing in yourself just because somebody in your life won't believe in you. You can't stop chasing the dreams of your life just because when you know when you do it, you're going to have to do it all by yourself.